I couldn't think of any Transformer that would appreciate the techie new backdrop more than Wheeljack, though I've let him into this little lab for about 3 minutes now, so who knows what he's actually built. A techie Autobot for a techie new backdrop. We are breaking in the new look review stage for Random Review with one of my favorite G1 Autobots since childhood, Wheeljack, specifically his original Generations release. This is going back to the very first iteration of the Generations line, well before it was line-wide gimmicks and combiners and headmasters and whatever else they could cram in. This was just about making a toy of the character. And this is not a bad one to start with. Seems like it was like wave 7, but you know, you get the point. He is actually a very heavy remold of TurboTrax from the Reveal the Shield line, which was technically a movie line, not Generations. You know what, don't think about it too hard, it was weird back then. But as such, he is not his traditional race car. He's a little bit Corvette-y, since he's still got a little bit of tracks in him, very long in the front, but no, there's plenty of remolding here to kind of shake up the design a little bit, keep it trademark and copyright friendly. He also has some remolding to give him a little bit of his G1 look. That's what this big Mad Max-ish bumper is for. That was on the original race vehicle. Here, it just looks like he's got a big cow catcher stuck to the front of the car, which I guess you would need going as fast as he does. It just looks like it'd take out a bunch of ankles to me, but hey, that's his thing. But still, I like the vehicle. It's not his traditional racer, but it still looks really cool. It's cast in his traditional white plastic with plenty of these green and red racing stripes all over. He looks quite exceptional. As a simplified and sleeked down version of his original deco, I think it does a good enough job of replicating it without putting in a whole bunch of tacky racetrack logos and advertisement stuff all over it. It works pretty well, I would say, as a modern Wheeljack that would be more home on a normal road rather than a racetrack. So we have the Autobot sigil there on the top, looking toward the back. This is back when they actually painted the rear section of the vehicle. You got red for the taillights. You've got that section in the back with the gunmetal gray paint. And look, a tiny speck of silver. This is like where the logo of the car or even the key lock would be for the trunk. That's really weird. You don't get that at all these days. Likewise in the front, the grille done up in like a gunmetal and a black color paint, as well as silver for the headlights. Everything nice and done. You can also see some of that gunmetal there on the rims of the wheels. Exceptionally well painted all around, completely loaded with the stuff. And of course, this also accounts for the area all around on the top of his translucent windshield, which lets you see inside a little bit tech detail. That's his butt. So let's see, what else can we point out? Actually, not his butt. That's, oh god, that's what, oh, I see what that, never mind. Let's stop focusing the camera on that particular body part. He also has these exhausts that are trimmed along on the side, silver painted, looking quite cool. And these are the first thing we have to talk about when we talk about transforming him. Now, just for starters, all he'll pretty much do is roll, which I do just because I want to see what that looks like in the waveform when I get into the editor. So, to get him transformed, first I'm going to go ahead and pluck off those exhausts. We can stash them up. Here, let's just kind of stash them over here in the little slots over here. There we go. That's just so we don't forget about them. Okay, so with those removed, we're going to go ahead and show you a leftover from Trax. It's something the toy is capable of doing, so yeah, I guess we have to talk about the flight mode. The flight mode itself is pretty simple. Just unclip the doors from the main body, flip out the wings like so. I'm going to go ahead and close the rear section back like that, and then go ahead and grab the guns again. These will connect into the sides to create some side cannons, just so you have a little bit of firepower when you're flying around. And yeah, it's a leftover for Trax, because Trax was known for having a flight mode. It's a little bit sloppy in engineering, I find. You know, the original Trax, you just flip out the wings and fold down a few parts, and that's it. But it didn't leave these enormous gaps in the vehicle, and it didn't have the wings just kind of hanging down on this strut full of hinges. It's a little bit ramshackle. Unfortunately, not the cleanest of designs. But at least you have it, and at least it's an option if you want it. And hey, they let you put the guns there, so that's something, I guess. Alright, so since this is where we start for the transformation, we might as well continue and go into the full robot mode. We'll go ahead and fold out the rear entirely. I'll go ahead and let you know, when you transform this guy back to robot, you have to make sure the arms are already connected to the back panels in the right way, or else the whole thing will not fold up. It's a little bit of a catch every time I transform it that I have to remember. We're also going to remove this piece, which we will need for later once we get this guy fully transformed. Alright, so that piece up for later. He's not that difficult to transform. He's a little bit complex in appearance, but really not too bad. We're going to separate the front legs and then extend them out. Likewise, ooh, that was a ball joint that should not have given. Likewise, we fold down the feet. You got to get them out of the tabs and then fold them down. That's where the ball joint popped on me. Get those all shored up. The arms themselves are kind of frictioned into place. Now the wheels on this guy, traditionally they were kind of in the G1 Wheeljack toy, they were kind of sat in the center of the shoulder. Can't do that here, so we'll leave them off to the side. That's as close as we get to the traditional look. Go ahead and bend his arms to the forward position so the elbows actually make sense. And from here, you take this big section and shove the whole thing up, which will make his arms fly out, make his head come up, and a little bit of automorphing just for fun. Yeah, a little bit of gimmicky in this line, but hey, it's not too terrible. So, with that out of the way, these wing sections can now extend out on these little slides, and then the slides will let you angle them up into their proper behind shoulder position. That's hard to do with this big shell in the way. Speaking of, let's go ahead and peg that into place now so we can call this guy at least mostly transformed. That'll clip in right there, right behind his head. And just a little bit of realigning just to clean him up a little bit before we present the finished robot mode. That is our deluxe Wheeljack transformed. Not a bad transformation. He's got plenty going on to be interesting. It's easy to forget how some of the steps work, though, so there's a little bit of fiddliness to the design. Overall, though, not too terrible. We're going to talk about proportions here in a minute. For now, we're going to look at the head, as we generally do here on Random Review to start, and he is very much the traditional big, clear-eared scientist that he typically is in the G1 cartoon. Unfortunately, light piping means his eyes look rather dead. I hate when light piping does this, and there's so many easy ways to fix it. They opted for none of them here, so unless you got a halogen bulb to stick behind his head, which has a screw through it, which will interfere with the light piping itself, yeah, he's going to look rather dim-eyed. This is for your final look at Wheeljack in the animated movie scene, I guess. I'm sorry to Wheeljack fans, it's a bad memory for me too. Overall, the proportions of the toy are a little bit funky. He's very big-legged, very short-legged, and very thin-armed. He's supposed to invoke a little bit of the G1 toy, which had a very kind of squat stance to him, very wide, short-legged. It also gave him a big gorilla-armed look, which thankfully they did not go with here. So he's a little bit more sanely proportioned. Let's put it that way. But overall, the toy does not look too bad here. He definitely invokes the original design, kind of cutting the difference between the animation model and the actual original toy. A lot of black and some more gunmetal gray now exposed, breaking up the white very nicely. He looks quite cool as a modern take on the Autobot scientist. I'm really happy. I think it's an extremely clever idea to look at Trax and Wheeljack and realize the wings and the top of the car as the chest makes this toy work for both. And the only engineering swap really between them is the legs being remolded to make his legs shorter, so they actually have a different stance, and to reverse them, as that is much closer to what you'd see on tracks as far as the legs go. So again, we have something of a Universe 2 Sideswipe Sunstreaker thing going on, where a quick reversal of parts gives you two different characters. Even though all it does is change the pants, it effectively works very well. You also have some more extra details. I like how these buried details are worked in. You have a lot of molding going on here to give him some techie detail all over his body. You know, he cleans up okay. Big shell on the back, that's unfortunate, but for the rest of the toy, not too bad. Everything else seems to clean up pretty well. He's got ankle tilts in both front and the back, so he also has plenty of balance. That is exceptionally nice. It also has a few other features going on that we'll get to here in a bit when we get into the accessory count. But we'll go ahead and go into the articulation, where the ball joint on the head works really well. Full range up and down a little bit too. Very expressive. The wings themselves do have hinges in them, so you can adjust them as needed. It gets them out of the way of poses, or just lets you customize the look itself. You have a ball joint here in the shoulder. It's got an interesting cut to it that will give you most positions, but it's a little bit weird sometimes. Nothing too terrible. Bicep rotates fully, 180-degree bend at the double elbow. Exceptionally nice. I love double elbows. Wrists rotate fully. Waist rotates all the way around, as we just saw. Ball jointed thighs, knees, 90-degree, and as mentioned, ankle tilt in both the front and the back. Exceptional balance on this toy, thanks to how wide the feet are and having those dual rockers. I love this. He's a toy that has no reason to have any kind of level of like high-end articulation, and yet here he stands with tons of it. It's not to say the toy is exceptionally well done or perfect by any means. Unfortunately, his automorph thing doesn't really lock into position very well, so it's very easy for things to kind of rock down and for him to get even more squat on you accidentally. So you have to always make sure that that's pushed up completely. I've never found a way of locking that into place, which has always seemed like an oversight to me. He makes up for it, though, in cleverness of design for his weapons. So that little chunk we removed from the center of him, that is actually the gun you got for TurboTrax, which in reality is not TurboTrax's gun. It is Wheeljack's shoulder rocket. So we're going to go ahead and clip it into one of the... this is another little bit of a design faux pas. That C-clip and that 3mm bar there never likes to stay in place the way it's supposed to. So it takes a little bit of adjusting. You have to make sure you're very careful when plugging it in, or else toy flies apart on you. That's never fun. But it does give you a way of shoulder mounting Wheeljack's traditional weapon, his traditional shoulder mounted gun. That's extremely cool to work, to kind of play two ways with that. Likewise, what used to be Trax's shoulder guns are now going to work as something else entirely different for Wheeljack. Wrenches! The wrenches themselves, being 5mm on the barrel, and the actual socket section, are more C-clips, which means they can connect any way you want if you find the 3mm bars. These themselves also have 3mm connection points for them if you want to build up even more. But I thought that was extremely clever to kind of work in something that's characterful and not a weapon itself. Like, it would have been easy just to make him more guns for Wheeljack, but he's a mad scientist. So to work in a couple tools, I think is an extremely cool twist. That, my friends, is Generations Wheeljack. A few engineering faux pas here and there, but for the most part, a satisfying transformation, extremely good articulation, and some characterful accessories make him a very standout release. This is one of those where I'm hard-pressed to think of what I would do differently to make a better retail-level Wheeljack toy. You pretty much have to go Masterpiece to get any better than this.